Hello and welcome to the Crafty Pint podcast. I'm Will.
I'm James, and welcome back to yet another show. We've got a pretty lively guest later on today, and a pretty lively discussion.
Word for him.
Yeah, I think you used the word
Mouthy at one point.
mouthy. Yes, mouthy to describe him. But I think pretty lively chat to have before we get to that point as well. There's been as we discussed it a number of times last year, and certainly the end of year podcasts. The issues of the industry have been getting a lot more coverage in the mainstream media, and that really seems to have come to a head in the last few days.
A couple of weeks, sort of. I mean, because it's excise increase time. It happens twice a year and has done since the early 80s. And there's been a lot of coverage around it in the mainstream media about how the price of beer is going up. Obviously, the price of beer is expensive in a pub. People really do notice it. It's the number one question I get asked by my friends. Like, why is a beer so expensive? Fruit and veg are expensive as well, unfortunately. The cost of living is expensive at the moment. But it's really, it's come up a lot. There's been a lot of attention from it. And the IBA, I think, have done a really good job. They have... Kylie Lethbridge, CEO of the IBA, has been pretty omnipresent, I think, in the media, and Cal, who was the chair until recently because of what happened with Kaiju, that they've really pushed hard and really, I think, gotten the word out about how prices are going up again and how the excise system does need to change.
Yeah, and it does feel like, I mean, I think generally this story comes up in all of the mainstream media every time. It happens twice a year. We don't tend to focus on it every time because it's an ongoing issue that has been there. Like, saying to you beforehand, the first meeting I ever went to of the Victorian Microbrewers Association back in 2008 or whatever, it was on the agenda there. And things have sort of changed since. However, election year, the fact things have been so tough, the fact that I guess the industry has had a lot more coverage in the media, they've probably got more contacts now. This does seem to be more awareness. I guess it must be a story that's getting traction for the the TV news and for media. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep running the story. So I think there is that increased attention and interest in the topic, and now it just really seems to have come to a head.
And I think importantly, there's been a lot of focus on being in the business of beer and in hospitality at the moment is so hard, and excise is just another thing that's hitting the industry. Kylie, I was about to say loves saying, I don't think she enjoys saying it, but as she often says, and as she said in our chat with us last year, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. Everything is hitting the industry at once, whether it's more regulation, consumer demand going down, excise, cost of goods going up. Everything is really hurting at the moment, and we are seeing a lot of breweries fail. Some are going to VA, some are going straight into liquidation, some are closing, some have been for sale for a very long time as well. It's obviously a really bad time to be in business.
Well, sometimes we're finding out about change of ownership with businesses we work from because we get our bookkeeper gets a note going, "Oh, can you change the details on the invoice?" There is a lot of stuff that's happening that is happening under the radar. And I think one thing you mentioned before that's worth, I guess, emphasizing as well is it's not just. I guess we focus a lot on breweries that have been closing or breweries in trouble. But a lot of pubs, and not just, craft beer venues, but pubs across the board are closing or are struggling, and they're starting to make a noise. And even pubs that don't go anywhere near independent beer or craft beer, they're saying it's getting too expensive for us to buy beer or, for our customers to buy beer from us. And I think once it sort of spreads and becomes a bigger issue and you have this sort of, I guess it's almost like every tranche of the industry talking about it now, from the brewers, big and small, the publicans, the bars, and now consumers going, well, it's too expensive, so we're not going to go out. And it feels like you're getting to a situation where, are you just driving people to go and buy, the cheapest beer they can and drink it at home and not go out and not have that, I guess, quintessential Australian, but also, I guess,
important social experience.
Yes,
of what drinking is.
Going out to people going to inns and taverns 1,000+ years ago, you know what I mean? It's always been part of the social fabric of life, for many people, and it just feels like that at the minute is just being undermined, and it does feel like there's just this sort of building momentum. We've seen stuff, I guess, messaging not just from the sort of the top with the IBA, and there's something I saw that came up yesterday from your mates in Queensland. They posted something on their Instagram page. Can of Larry, and just, our mate Larry tells the ATO to piss off, with a very clear image of 40% of your Larry goes to taxes. And I think that sort of stuff we're seeing more often. Obviously, the IBA is pushing all of its members and supporters to contact their local their local members,
Yeah.
at the head of election time. And yet, you kind of think, well, this is kind of good. As we said last year, it might not be positive coverage all the time, but at least it's coverage.
Yeah.
And hopefully it leads to something positive, on a macro level that needs to happen, to sort of help the industry. However, at the minute, they're not sort of getting the response they want from government.
Well, not necessarily. There was an interesting letter sent out by the ACCC that the RBA shared with its members, sort of reminding breweries to be careful, I guess you could say, to make sure the statements they're saying about price increases are true. For a bit of context around that, it's not uncommon for this time of year, and the second time this happens later in the year, for breweries to send out to, say, pubs and bottle shops and say, this core range beer is going up, excise has gone up, this beer is going up, and they do sort of roll in increases is one. So that's potentially what the ACCC is sort of focused on at the moment. We might have more on this by the time the podcast comes out. I've sent some questions to the ACCC,
but essentially the warning letter is kind of saying if we find that brewers or other businesses are, I guess, misspeaking and allocating more of the increase than is actually true to the tax element, then they could be punished. And interestingly, the letter says that if you're a business, you could be fined $50 million for misspeaking. And individuals, $2.5 million. I spoke to one brewer yesterday, goes, why not make it $1 billion? Why not make it $10 billion? Like, it does seem such a ridiculous figure, but at the end of the day, I guess that, the messaging is, I guess the industry has been petitioning the ACCC for years to have a look at other issues affecting the industry, such as tap contracts. That's not happening. And now in the other direction, they're coming back going,
exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting timing. I think the important things to find out, which I've asked the ACCC, I haven't heard back yet, but it hasn't been, at the time of recording, it hasn't been very long since I reached out to them. But whether or not this is a common thing for them, if they've sent it before or if they often remind breweries of this or anyone of this, if they've sent it to other groups like the Hotel Association or the bigger breweries represented by the Brewers Association, things like that, just to sort of get some clarity, and also just why, I think it would be good to have some clear examples of what exactly they're talking about here.
Because, what warrants a $50 million fine?
Yeah, exactly. And we can't speak, I don't know how every single brewery in the country messages, but I would say certainly the IBA messaging has been around, again, to use Kylie's terminology, death by 1,000 cuts. It's everything impacting the industry. It's not just excise, but Australia is the third highest beer tax nation in the world, if that makes sense. Highest tax on beer anywhere.
And eyeing up position 2 on the podium as well. In the near future, the way things are going.
And it's very old legislation we're dealing with. There's also the wet tax, which wine deals with, which is very different, and makes wine taxed at a much lower rate. So there's all these kind of things and that's what I think the media commentary has been around. Prior to the ACCC as well, the Treasurer Jim Chalmers did say, basically, he was quoted in the Daily Telegraph as saying, the extra excise on a schooner next week is less than 1 cent, and don't believe anyone who tries to tell you otherwise. Drinkers are doing it tough enough without being ripped off or lied to. So he's gone pretty hard at the increase in prices. Again, I struggle to see hospitality businesses that are doing well, and if they are doing well, they're very large groups potentially, and I would say that very large hospitality groups are sort of a consequence and a symptom of having these kind of regulations that's allowed mammoth hospitality groups to grow,
to snap up,
and also businesses that maybe they're not making that much money off beer, maybe they're actually making a huge amount of money off poker machines as well, which breweries don't. You can't be an IBA member and make all that money off poker machines as well. So it's pretty disingenuous thing, I think it's fair to say. The Treasurer, again, it's an election year, not going to tell you who to vote for, but I know the IBA is planning some campaigning around this, talking to members. I think it's going to be a really important time for people to speak to their local member of parliament. I live in a marginal seat. It's looking like it'll be a pretty close battle between Labor and the Greens in a city dude that I am. And I think, there's door knocking's going to start soon, so I think it's really important that people take that time to sort of, if you can, inform yourself about it and explain it. And I'm sure breweries will, and the RBA are doing a really important education piece, making sure brewery owners understand exactly how to talk to politicians. Politicians, they love hosting things in breweries, and they love, I've seen plenty of campaign launches take place in breweries. So hopefully they sort of understand and are willing to listen to brewery owners as well about what's going on.
Yeah, well, we saw Albo rock up to the launch of the Inner West Brewery Trail, and he's represents the Marrickville in the Inner West with all these breweries there. He's had a beer named after him for years by Willie the Boatman, going in and saying, I've been a prime minister for craft beer, and there's no evidence to back that up, talking of disingenuous. And I don't know, it seems interesting that, you wonder what Labour's policy is coming into the election, in that, no one on the right's going to vote for them. They've been pushing people further to the left, that you think they might look for some sort of, popular, policies to take into the campaign, into the campaign, into the next election. And yet it seems that they're doing everything they can to be against what could be a potentially very positive thing for people and the hospitality industry and the brewing industry. These small producers that employ so many people.
Yeah.
You kind of wonder if they're just trying to sort of blow themselves up and guarantee they won't be in government for a while afterwards.
I think if there's going to be a change, now is a very good time for it to happen. There's I'm a bit of a political nerd, and there's just so many close battles in seats this election. There's going to be so many face-offs between Labor and the Green, Labor and Liberals, Liberals and the Teals, Nationals and other independents. It's going to be a lot of marginal seats. I think there's going to be fewer and fewer safe seats in the country as well, which is a good thing for democracy, which is a good thing for getting people's voices across. So it would be a really good time for some messaging to really get across, and people to talk about those numbers of people that craft breweries employ, the close relationship they have with agriculture and all those kind of things, the fact that it is modern manufacturing in a country that used to be very good at manufacturing and where a lot of that has disappeared. Like, these are all important things that I think it's a really great story to tell. It just needs to happen.
Well, and I think that conversation is happening on certain stories that we publish. For example, the story with Kaiju coming out of administration with the founders still in control. Obviously, all those stories lead to a bit of sort of, I guess, similar debate in comments on Facebook or Instagram, and this is part of it was tied to the taxpayers paying the bill. If they're going to pay 15 cents on the dollar to the ATL, what have you. And it's like, well, you can't sort of be upset about that, at the same time upset that there's excise tax is so high. And I think what you often find as those conversations go on in the comments is people jumping in going, well, if you care, then this is what you can do. And so consumers having that awareness that, okay, it isn't necessarily brewers or pubs or whatever trying to rip people off. They're dealing with this very challenging situation, and if you care enough to read about stuff and to comment online or whatever, then perhaps you can be part of petitioning for change.
And the IBA, whenever they share a story like this, there's a lot of people jumping in the comments saying, what do we do? How do we help? Hawkers, last year, they also pushed people. We'll put how you can get involved with the IBA stuff in the show notes. But people are jumping up and down to do it. And I think it's a really good thing. It's just about making sure there's some kind of momentum about it. Again, who knows when the election will be? If it's the interest rates go down, it could be quite soon because Labor Party might take the opportunity while things are looking a bit better. It has to be May or before, so hopefully something happens quite soon.
And I think these sort of discussions have been happening. We've run stories 2 years ago with hawkers talking about the increased cost of goods and tax and reduced profitability. Around about the same time, Wayward put out their recession ale, which listed some of the key inputs and highlighted how much they were paying in tax on their beer. And I think it was sort of happening every now and now. It is happening. More and more people are putting out that same messaging and sort of singing from the same hymn sheet. And I do think, much as we operate in the sort of more in the sort of the craft beer sort of indie sector, the fact that bigger publicans, are getting on board and sort of sharing the same messaging, saying it's getting really hard.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a great line from Mazen sort of later on in the show, the main interview, where he talks about, it's almost trying to destroy part of what makes Australia an Australian. You know, take away this whole thing that has been very central to the, I guess, the you know, modern Australian psyche and you know, society. But yeah, it's definitely, you know, long story short, it's really interesting to see how much is happening. You know, we know the excise tax is going to come around twice a year, and it is noticeably much more of a discussion point now, much noisier. And while the most recent, I guess, responses from the ACCC and Jim Chalmers seem to be going in one direction, you know, I guess that might even help the IBA and the industry in its cause to be able to say, hey, look, this is what we're up against.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I guess other news before we get to get to Mazen.
Quickly, another story that we ran on the site this week. Interesting. Tiny Mountain is will soon be back, which is Townsville brewery that was started by Lion.
Yeah.
That they looked to get rid of, along with a lot of their other sort of smaller breweries over the last few years. They sold it. It's been bought by the Catazina Group, I believe is how you pronounce it, who also own Valley Hops in Fortitude Valley.
Yeah, so they're a bunch of hospo venues, but yeah, Valley Hops was their first brewery venture, which I think has been going well for them. Yeah, I mean, so Tiny Mountain wasn't even open too long ago, but you know, Lion did go through a phase with their Bevy Brewing in WA. They were involved with obviously getting Yamundi Brewery off the ground. They sort of relaunched the Malt Shovel Brewers idea from Camperdown. Now all of those have sort of been you know, sold off or closed, or you know, with the Bevy Brewing venue is now a Little Creatures venue. But yeah, the new team have gone in. They've sort of refurbed the place. They're going to keep a lot of things the same. They've still got the head brewer that was there before. They've expanded capacity, and yeah, just I guess it's another example of, yes, there are closures, there's changes, but there are people who still see, you know, a future, or still see, you know, opportunity out there to bring small scale local brewing to parts of the country.
Yeah, the fact that they've looked at the Catazina Group have looked at it and gone, this was already a popular venue, and Lion did say that at the time. It was more that the sort of beer they wanted to be the flagship, and a regional player didn't really take off.
Yeah.
The fact that the new owners have looked at it, they've said it's a popular hospitality venue, it worked, and we're actually expanding that side of it, I think tells you a lot about where the industry is tracking as well, that people do love drinking in breweries. There's still a lot of opportunity there, and there's still a lot of excitement there, and sort of businesses that can work around that as well.
Yeah. And I think something else I've mentioned since the start of the year, which hopefully is a bit of a positive, is that we've actually added a number of new listings to our brewery and venue directory, which is always great. So we'll include the show notes from these, but like Sea Legs Brewing, they're approaching their 6th birthday. They rebranded the end of last year. Brisbane Brewery at Kangaroo Point near the Brisbane River. The new, I guess, venture from Brewski, the Alfred Street Bar and Bottle-O, or part of their My Beer Dealer group. We posted about that on social the other day, and people who've been in there are like, it is just like a great evolution of what and Brewski was already such a popular place. Got Depot Brewing in Sydney, coming onto the site soon. Broken Bay Brewing, another one up in the Northern Beaches. Obviously, Bendigo Brewing, we talked about the other day, you went to visit recently. So, I mean, yeah, with the previous couple of years, we've been sort of potentially losing, you know, business for understandable reasons, for people, you know, either reassessing the way they spend their money, or just, you know, shutting down, changing ownership. So it's been nice to have that sort of happening at the start of the year. Long may it continue.
yes, hopefully.
Yeah. And I guess on to this week's guest, one of the, unsurprisingly, one of the more sort of, I guess, broad-ranging and interesting conversation. I think we probably asked about 4 questions over the space of an hour and just let the man roll.
We could have left the room at a few times, potentially, but yeah, obviously we've alluded to him, he's in the show title, but yeah, Mazen Tajar, great to have him on the show. Obviously, there's a huge movement in the Hawkers business, how they've merged with White Bay to form the Social Drinks Group, but it's also their 10-year anniversary.
Well, that was originally when I approached Mazen last year, your 10th birthday's coming up, will you come on the show? And then it became a discussion about the merger, which is at the start of the show. And then obviously, even before this sort of latest, I guess, turns in the wider excise tax and sort of CDS kind of issues recently, we were discussing all that with him when he came into the studio a few days ago, and he's always been very outspoken, very strong on these topics, and he is there. If you're interested in that stuff, jump to the second half of the chat after the break. We were, we certainly when we were looking for the reels to, the cuts to put out on reels on Instagram and TikTok, it's like you get to the end of the show, it's like, my God, you could use every single part of what he's saying here. He really sort of builds to a crescendo. And in between the two parts of the chat with Mazen, we'll also be hearing again from Steve Hendo Henderson and his Rockstar Brewing Academy, some examples of how they're helping brewers save time and make money through more efficient brewing. But
we wouldn't normally shout out jobs on the podcast as well. You're not always finding on the Craft Bite job board though. But he's hiring for Brownstone Microbrewery again at the moment. I love everything about that. It's a tiny little brew pub in Melbourne's outer southeast near Dandenong. Actually, I've never heard of the suburb and don't know how to pronounce it, so I won't try. But it's sort of this great opportunity where it's not really a full-time job, but you sort of get to be trained under Hendo as well. And a lot of really experienced brewers now have come through that, brewery owners as well. So
it's been a pretty handy little conveyor belt for the industry for sure.
Yeah.
So bit of an extended intro this week. So we have plenty to talk about. As we've said, there may be an update on the ACCC side of things, but by the time you watch or listen to this, if so, we'll include something in the show notes so you get the latest.
Yeah, well, enjoy the chat and also make sure you like and subscribe. Cheers.
Cheers.
Ever thought of turning your love of brewing into a career? Then you need to check out Bendigo TAFE. They're the first of any TAFE campus in Victoria to install a new professional standard microbrewery right there in the classroom. Whether you're already working in a brewery and wanting to upskill, or just keen to get your foot in the door, Bendigo TAFE offers course options to suit your needs. You can study theory components online to fit around your work hours, and then take practical assessments on campus using the new microbrewery under the guidance of highly qualified teachers and expert brewers. Take your brewing to the next level with Bendigo TAFE. Call 13TAFE, T-A-F-E, to apply now, or visit bendigotafe.edu.au/brewing. Eligibility criteria applies. Some or all of this training is delivered with Victorian and Commonwealth Government funding. RTO 3077.
Mazen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I guess before we get to the 10 years of Hawkers and the Mazen story, which was our plan when we first invited you on the show a few months ago, I guess we should talk about the big news, the merger. Do you want to tell us how and why that's all come about?
That is actually a very good question.
And I guess just to summarise, people who might not have seen it, we will include this in the show notes. You've basically merged Hawkers with White Bay in Sydney, and yourself and the founders of White Bay are going to take a step back. Yeah. New CEO coming in, and how and why has that all happened?
No one starts a brewery thinking when we mature we're going to merge and create this bigger drinks company, but it's the nature of the landscape in Australian beer over the last 10 years, and how the goalposts have continuously changed due to external factors, primarily government policy, COVID, floods, bushfires, all these kinds of
international wars,
Ukraine specifically driving prices up of grain, shipping, all these kinds of things, and in an ever changing environment where the goalposts keep shifting. The question then beckons, well, what do you do? How do you remain independent first? And how do you transform your business back to sustainability? So for the first 8 years of Hawker's life, it was a very profitable venture. And then post-COVID, with the rises in excise, the stupidity of CDS, container deposit schemes for anyone playing at home, and just the sheer crunch on the consumer purchasing power, meant that it's become challenging. I mean, over the last 2 years, we've lost, I think, 175 breweries have quietly shut down. 50 have gone into administration or the likes. So the question amongst the brewers is it's a circle of what do we do? And one of the interesting things that came out of COVID is this new focus on parochialism, local, is way more important. And me and Adam and me and Tim as well, we've been friends for a long time, especially me and Adam. We have a lot of respect for what each of us has done. I mean, Adam has a long history in beer as well. And we were just having a chat one day, and it just made sense. It made sense that we would combine the two companies, combine our complementing portfolios of beer and our complementing skills, and what we bring to the table are very complementing. It took a while because, as everyone knows, we went through voluntary administration, so we had to clear that mess up and really come out the other end before we could do something sustainable.
And just on that note as well, I remember talking to you around about the time that Hawkers went through VA and then came out the other side, and you were very clear that that wasn't like the silver bullet, and it was something that you sort of had been forced into for various reasons, mainly this trying to negotiate with the ATO, but that it wasn't necessarily going to make things easier. I think some people think that when businesses go through VA, it's like, okay, clean slate, start again. But obviously that was, it does fix certain things, but you were still in a situation that's led to this. It wasn't like, okay, everything's hunky dory again. I know how sort of stressed you've been at times since then, and looking for, I guess, a solution that was more sustainable.
It actually, VA makes things much worse on many fronts. So the fact that you've been trading with suppliers for 8, 9, 10 years, and you go into VA through basically no fault of your own many times. I'm not generalizing for all brewers, but a lot of brewers end up in VA because the environment is so dramatically changed in the last 2 years. I mean, the pattern of voluntary administrations in beer is an indication that there is something structurally wrong with where the market is today. You can't dismiss someone mismanaging or being an idiot or taking bad business decisions when it's this vast number of people struggling in the industry. And VA is not a silver bullet. It does wipe away a lot of your debt, but it creates a new hurdle and a new problem vis-a-vis the suppliers, who all of a sudden can't get insurance on their trade debt that they're giving you because you've been in administration. So a lot of your trading terms move to either cash on delivery or prepayments, and you slowly begin to build up that credit again. Luckily, we've now rebuilt credit with 99% of our suppliers. But the first hit is, normally you would buy malt in bulk. We buy 27 tons of malt at any one time, which is a lot of malt for anyone playing at home. But that's how we drive our costs down, right? By having one big delivery in bulk into silo, not small bags as and when we need them. So because we buy in bulk, we have long trading terms. So we pay 60, 90, 120 days sometimes, which means that malt can sit in our silo, will produce the beer, which would take 2 weeks to ferment, another week to ship it out into the market, and then maybe 2-3 weeks to sell that beer if it's a limited release, to get rid of it. Or if it's a core range beer, it'll sit in warehouses for a bit longer than that, sometimes much longer than that. And so that's money that we could pay 90 days or 120 days later, which now we have to pay up front. And we're not going to collect that that money from the market. In the opposite way. So we used to buy the ingredients, make the beer, collect the money, pay the suppliers. Now we have to pay in advance. So yes, VA is not a silver bullet. People think, oh yeah, you're wiping away your debt. You're kind of screwing over the suppliers. It's very funny when people don't understand the VA process. They can almost be more royal than the royalists, right? Everyone's so anxious about defending the suppliers. We've worked with these suppliers for 10 years. We've had a very open conversation with them about it. the suppliers in the VA process are the ones who actually vote whether to shut you down or allow you to come back. The VA process takes the control away from management, away from the shareholders, and puts it in the hands of the creditor, of the administrator, whose sole task is to ensure the best outcome for the suppliers and the creditors. And then once they propose a plan, the deed of company arrangement, if they get to that point where they discover that there has not been insolvent trading and there's nothing fishy going around and the business is viable, they will put that plan to the creditors, who then vote to allow the company back into trading or not.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times during that process, like at Hawkers, the company was put up for sale to see if they get any offers that will give a better return to the creditors, not the shareholders. So when you hand over the keys to the administrator, you effectively are out of control. Mm-hmm. There's a risk that, one, they might find that you've been trading insolvent and shut you down, or that you don't have a viable business and shut you down, or that you have a viable business and someone on the outside is willing to pay a little bit more than you can afford, and the creditors will have a better outcome.
And certainly we've seen some cases which have gone in that direction.
We've seen them go in every direction at this point, sort of.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because companies that enter VA have a variety of reasons they enter VA. Some are badly managed, some are just Ponzi schemes, and some are managed really well, but the environment and the goals have shifted so much that it's become impossible to service the problems that they have.
Yeah. And having made it out the other side and then had these long conversations with ATS and Tim at White Bay and for the merger, you said before about how you're sort of going to bring together the complementary parts of the business. Yeah. I guess that's what people on the outside are keen to see what that means. Sort of, obviously you're going to be sort of taking a bit of a backseat, the new CEO Judd's coming in, but, you must have had some long discussions about what that actually means. So, can you give us some sort of practical examples about how you see that sort of physically, logistically working for the two businesses?
So we have, as a lot of people know, the Hawkers Brewery is capable of producing 7 million liters of beer. Last year we produced 3.5 million liters of beer. Probably the vast majority of the revenue is coming from the Hawkers brand, right? And we have White Bay have a brewery in Sydney that's capable of producing 2 million liters of beer. Funnily enough, they have 21 tanks, something like that, 22 tanks. We have 21 tanks too. Mm-hmm. The difference is our smallest tank is bigger than their biggest tank. So in terms of what we can produce, our minimum batch sizes for our internal consumption were 4,000 liters. Whereas the minimum batch size that we can do at White Bay is 1,800 liters. So all of a sudden, we can produce a range of beers and have a lot of tanks that we can hold beers in for a longer period. That's why White Bay, for example, does amazing lagers, because they really lager their beers away in tank. Mm-hmm. Their Pilsner is held in tank for 3 months. Like, we couldn't afford to do that at Hawkers. Mm-hmm. So there's a range of complementary abilities in terms of size and breweries. We can produce beers very efficiently and of very high quality at Hawkers, while keeping the cost down because we produce en masse. White Bay can't do that because it's a much more smaller scale brewery. The synergies extend even further. Hawkers is a rather established brand in Victoria. It's one of the, I don't want to say dominant because that sounds a bit condescending and arrogant, but it's one of the essential brands of Victoria, and it's got national distribution. Whereas White Bay is a new brand that has a lot of headroom that they can grow into. They are still at the infancy stage of the brand launch, so they can benefit a lot from the Hawkers network. By just sticking the White Bay brand on, we're able to very quickly double, if not triple, the White Bay volume through the Hawkers network. They have no presence in Victoria, so imagine if we're able to just stick that down there. Then comes the back end of things. So being able to process payments, invoices, statements, logistics, all of these things on the back end, jump onto our distribution, make it more efficient, jump onto their distribution, make it more efficient. There's just a lot of synergy.
Do you think it's important to keep them distinct to a degree as well? Like, I imagine a problem is sort of, if you have a lot of, I know White Bay focus on lagers, and you might do more with hop forward beers or something like that, but you still have to, how do you know what to sell and where, and how do you make sure you're building both brands, I guess, rather than cannibalizing them, which arguably is what potentially happens, say, Mighty Craft or someone like that.
Yeah, I think the Mighty Craft model for me from day one, I think one of the earlier conversations that we had was I couldn't really understand what they were trying to do. The Mighty Craft model just seemed driven by a lot of people that were experienced in big beer, and they picked up small regional unknown brands and they tried to push them onto the national front without really building the underlying equity of the brand. That's not what we're trying to do at Hawkers and White Bay, at Social Drinks, I should say. I need to get over the.
You'll get there.
I need to remember this is Social Drinks now. So what we're trying to do at Social Drinks is definitely maintain the independence and the identity of each brand. Also recognizing the parochialism, right? So now we have a New South Wales focus and a Victorian focus without them being competing with each other. They're complementing each other, right? So we can collab with a pub group in Victoria now for the first time because we can produce 1,800 liters of beer.
Yeah.
And the guys at White Bay can produce kegs at a much more efficient price if we wanted to. So but that doesn't eat into the separate identities of each. They'll be run separately. They'll have their own brewing teams individually. The sales teams will be unified. And the question of what do we sell into which place, I don't think it really matters. What matters is we need to change the mindset a bit of how we approach our venue and our retail customers, in the sense that we need to figure out how it's a win-win. We need to identify what is the business issue that we are tackling and what is the best beer and best tool to tackle that. So it may be we are in a venue in Sydney that has enough beers from New South Wales, and Hawkers might be the best beer to sell into that venue. Or we might be in a venue that already has Hawkers on, and a White Bay beer might be the best beer to sell on that.
Both you and ATS talked when I spoke to you on the day the merger was announced about the potential for more brands to join Social Drinks, maybe within beer, maybe without. You talked about parochialism being important. Could you see, has part of the discussion sort of focused on the approach that CUB, Asahi, whether deliberately or not, took, and sort of, a ring of brands around the country, looking for a Queensland brewery potentially, or a WA brewery. Is that part of the mindset, or is it more a case of who's interested?
That is absolutely part of the mindset. Yeah. I mean, there is a realization that, first of all, we need to respond to the big multinationals, right? And beer, local independent beer, is struggling to find an answer to that, right? And so this is a kind of a collaborative model. This is a genuine full merger. Both shareholders now own both companies completely, so it's not half split, or it's a.
And was that always the plan, or did that sort of evolve over time? Because I know the conversations you were saying when we spoke, they went on a long time, because it does feel like more of a merger than any of the other sort of consolidations or collaborations we've seen in recent years.
It developed into that.
Yeah.
The original conversation started off with, how can we keep doing what we do, but somehow strengthen our position in the market? And the only way you could strengthen your position is somehow to reduce your cost, which in this market is extremely difficult when everything's going up. And there's a misconception that, if interest rates come down, then prices will come down. The reality is, this is the new price. And we all must accept that our purchasing power is vastly diminished and will be diminished for the foreseeable future until we see real income growth again. I mean, I don't blame people when they go and buy beer from the discount bin at Dan Murphy's, because they've got to pay rent. It's very difficult for someone whose rent has gone up exponentially over the last few years to go and justify $20-$30 more to support independents sometimes. Yeah. It's difficult. That's the reality of it. It's not they don't want to, it's they can't. I mean, during COVID, you could put out a stupid beer at any price and people were happy because they were getting paid and sitting at home and had nothing to spend on.
The glory days of COVID.
The glory days of COVID. Good Lord. May they never come back.
Yes. Yeah.
But so in a space where it's difficult to sell more and it's difficult to control your costs. So the one way to control your costs, like we said, is to increase your volume, increase your efficiency. And the way to sell more is to jump onto new distribution points. So White Bay jumping on the Hawkers distribution point in Victoria will immediately increase the volume of White Bay. Hawkers jumping on the White Bay will increase the volume. So that is how the model came about into a full merger. And we are looking at other potential partners that will come into this venture, but not purely beer. This could very much become a multi-bev company. Did I get into business? Did I get into the beer world in 2014 when we first talked in the Lindrum Hotel when you brought me that oyster stout?
The old bulging boisterous bicep.
Yeah. When
now that is a fucking beer.
when we were sitting there, was that my dream to ultimately end up in a multi-bev national beer, national drink company? Probably not. But I'm still very passionate about beer, and I'm just not willing to give up the fight this easily to the big multinationals.
Oh, you feel like you're sort of a bit reinvigorated. I've spoken to you a few times where I'm like, God, the guy just sounds drained, and done with it. But you seem sort of reinvigorated by what's happened. And I guess I wonder, do you feel sort of maybe a new excitement and or pressure? Because there's going to be a lot of other people out there now looking at social drinks and going, okay, how are they going to do this? Is this a viable option for us? Whether it's, having a conversation with yourself or with Judd, or whether it's then accelerating conversations they might already be having with other breweries. That it's like, are you now the new case study, the new test, for people out there that might have looked at Mighty Craft or other local drinks collective and gone, okay, if these guys can make it work, maybe this is something we look at?
I think the problem is we shouldn't be myopic. You bring up there's always a tendency in Australia. We live in our own little bubble, right? And we all revert back to the same experiences that were either successful or unsuccessful in our own little market. And we need to see what's happening globally. So this model's already proven very successful when Canarchy came together, right? Eventually, Canarchy got sold to Monster, but that's for a different reason in the way they structured their shareholding. But the purpose of the business plan in the beginning was to strengthen the individual breweries. Worked very well. They failed in the way they structured their shareholding because they gave preferential shares to private equity funds that came in and yada, yada, yada. So we took a lot of that operating model from there and brought it back here, avoiding the pitfalls of bringing in private equity. There's no new private equity into this company. This is basically the last capital raise we did was internally from the existing shareholders and a few friends and family that we know. Is this the new model? I think there are very few breweries that will be able to survive the next period if they don't seriously think
of a certain size, I guess. I mean, it's a brew pub operations.
Correct. If you're a brew pub, you're not paying tax. You don't CDS doesn't affect you.
Yeah.
Excise doesn't affect you.
So when you're talking breweries, you're talking those that are above the excise. They're selling regionally away.
Yeah. Anyone who, I mean, you need to think if you're selling 150,000 liters of beer a year, you basically pay zero excise, right? So even if you sell 300,000 liters of beer a year, you're paying half the excise bill. When you consider that's 55-60% of your total cost of a brewery our size, then, if you're down to zero, you're already at a price advantage to what we are able to produce. It's so bizarre. It's so skewed and it's so screwed that the Australian system, the tax system, means that the bigger you get, the less efficient you become, because you suddenly have to pay stupid tax. It just doesn't make sense. So the system is skewed to protect the big guys and nothing in between. So that valley between this, where you can survive as a brew pub and where you're actually viable as a big brewery, is become so huge.
And what about you personally, Mazen? What's next? Don't go too much into your personal life, but what's the plan for the future? Because it has been, as you said, like a stressful several years, 5 years or however many years we're into this now.
It has been quite stressful. Look, I for the last 10 years, I can't remember a single time taking any vacation time off. I've been traveling to see my son, which anyone who has a 10-year-old will know, and prior to that, before 10-year-old, is a full-time job, even more than running a brewery, just running behind a child. What I'd like to do is I'm stepping back from the day-to-day management, but I'm not stepping back from the company. So I'll still sit on the board of directors. I will be involved a bit in supporting the new CEO in terms of operations. I'll still be here for events. I'm still an Australian citizen. You can't get rid of me that easily. Deportation is not an option. Even if Trump was to be voted in Australia, he still couldn't deport me. So that's a good thing, I guess. But I want to take just a bit of time to breathe. And then decide what's next for Mazen. Still, Hawkers and White Bay and social drinks will be a very big part of my life. I'm very excited to now have another baby called White Bay, not just Hawkers. I don't know. It's weird because it's been so stressful for so long. Having a partner in crime, which is White Bay, has kind of lifted the weight off my shoulders. I no longer have to carry that weight alone, and I think it's the same on the other side as well. For once, I'm excited about the business. I'm thinking about really cool ideas. Look for us at Gabs this year. I'm one of those people that never got excited by Gabs because I thought it was too commercialized, and then we've come up with a really cool concept for Gabs. I'm revitalized, but I do want to take some time to have a think about what I want to do.
And do you see a medium to long-term future of Mazen in Australia? I mean, I would have spoken to you very early on back in the hotel when you were first discussing the ideas for Hawkers. Do you see, that was 11 years ago now?
Yeah.
Or do you think that the next big adventure, while you'll still maintain an interest in social drinks and Hawkers and White Bay, do you think the next big adventure may take you elsewhere again?
Look, I keep telling people, and this is genuine, I'm a very proud Australian. I love this country. I specifically love Melbourne. I feel genuinely at home here. Whenever the plane is landing into Melbourne Airport, I feel this sense of relief that I'm coming back home. This is home. So Australia will always be a big part of me. I need to be a bit closer to my son, who's now 11, and he's maturing to be a very fine young man. I would like to spend more time with my son and with my mom, who's seen the last 11 years away from her son. But that doesn't take away from my passion for Australia. I don't know what the next part is, but definitely Australia will be a part of that.
Global citizen, Mazen.
Global citizen. No, proudly Lebanese, proudly Australian. I don't need to be a citizen of everywhere. I'm very proud of my Lebanese heritage, and I'm very proud of my Australian citizenship. I consider myself to be a Lebanese Australian, and I love this place. Yeah. Like I was having conversations with people back home. Just being able to jump on my bicycle and ride the many cycling routes around Melbourne is just it gives you so much energy. It gives me so much energy.
Yeah. Well, as you're about to take your breather, maybe we'll take a quick breather now, and then we'll come back for a chat about the 10-year anniversary of Hawkers and looking back, the highlights of that decade as well. So see you after the break.
Cheers.
Hey guys, we're back with Hendo, who runs the Rockstar Brewer Academy. Guys, many of you would know, after years of honing his skills and expertise with many of Australia's leading craft breweries, Hendo is now helping brewers all over the world improve their skills, save time and money, brew better beer with Rockstar Brewer Academy. Mate, welcome back. Thank you for joining us yet again.
It's good to see you, Craig. How you doing, mate?
Very good, mate. Now, today we touched on last week a little bit about just how the system works and people get started, but I want to get a little bit more into the detail, describe that journey of a brewer. They've had that call with you, they feel they're a good fit, they want to improve, they want to save time and money and so on. What does that journey look like through the academy?
Yeah, so probably a good story is to talk about Brenton from Kickback Brewing down in Aldinga in South Australia. So Brenton approached me when he was building his brewery. So he had just ordered his stainless steel and was waiting for the fabricators in China to put his brewery plant equipment together. And we started working with each other. We put him through Beer Quality Bootcamp, which is my foundation beer quality and consistency program. And he basically was doing pilot brewing at the time. We worked on things like water chemistry, defining quality, CIP, consistent brewing, carbonation, dissolved oxygen, packaging, all that sort of thing. And he went through that program, and then he kind of disappeared when his brewing equipment arrived, and he went and commissioned his brewery. And then a few weeks later, he reached out via the community and he said, I've got a problem. I said, what's the problem? He goes, I've run out of beer. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty good problem to have, mate. And he said, with a few swear words involved, he said, no, I need to put money in the till. And I'm like, okay, what's the problem? And it turns out that the problem that he had was his lager, Munich Helles was his biggest selling beer. And it was taking 6 to 8 weeks of residence time, right? So he couldn't produce the beer fast enough with the number of tanks that he had. So we worked with each other, and we turned out there was a really simple fix just around water chemistry and a little bit with fermentation. And we have now pretty much shortened that residence time up to about 3 to 4 weeks. You'll have to ask him for the exact number. And basically that got the ball rolling again. In addition to that, right, Brenton works really hard on his beer quality all the time, and he's won many awards at the AIBAs, at the Royal Adelaide Beer and Cider Awards. I think the first time that he entered the AIBAs, he entered 10 beers, and he got 2 gold, 7 silver, and 1 bronze. So that just goes to show that the sort of the outcomes that we achieve at the Rockstar Brewer Academy.
It's fascinating because I think, a lot of brewers in that same situation, their first response might be, we need to go out and buy another $15,000 fermentation tank or something like that. But just with those simple steps, you're able to, use what they've got to solve a problem. So someone's come through the program, they're a graduate of the Rockstar Brewer Academy. What does success look like at the end of that journey?
Yeah, so success for a member of the Rockstar Brewer Academy. So the thing that I need to stress is it's not a course and there are no graduates. Okay, it's a membership community basically where I'm always putting new knowledge into the program. It's constantly growing, and we're constantly helping each other wherever each individual brewer happens to be, during their professional brewing journey. What does success look like? Great question. I would say that success would be, someone like Chris Delarue down at Eclectic Brewing in South Australia. He's done an amazing job. He's a home brewer turned pro brewer, and he won in his short. It was within 2 months of joining the Rockstar Brewer Academy. He had won 1 or 2 trophies at the Royal Adelaide Beer and Cider Awards. He's just sent me some beers last week, and they are phenomenal. And he's this tiny little brewery, and he's maxed out his sales, and he can't make any more. He's making as much beer as he can, as best as he can, as efficiently as he can, whilst applying all that passion that he's got within him. It's really cool to watch.
That's living the dream right there, Hendo. I love it. So, guys, yeah, there you have it. If you want to brew better beer, do book in for a free 15-minute calibration call with Hendo. It's not a sales thing. It's more just to see if you're a good fit together and what the opportunities might be. So visit rockstarbrewer.com/calibration. Pick a time that works best for you. Hendo, I'm sure you'll look forward to talking to many new brewers.
Sure do. And look forward to meeting you.
Cheers, guys. See you next time, Hendo.
Cheers, mate.
So, Mazen, 10 years of Hawkers. Tell us a little bit about how you're celebrating it.
10 years of Hawkers, my God. The past just like that, with a wink of an eye. Yeah, we've got a lot on. So on the 22nd of February, we have a big party at the brewery. It's a collab with a record label. There'll be bands. Actually, people can start to see details of this on our socials. We've got some special beers coming out. There's a rebrew of one of our original beers that was very popular. There is
not the saison,
not the saison.
James,
not the saison, which everyone says, you should brew a saison. Every time we make a saison, we can't sell it. So no. But unfortunately, because I love saisons, right? No, it's not the saison. We'll see one of our original beers come back. We'll see a 10th anniversary special Imperial Stout, the beer, as we tend to do. We'll see a new take on our favorite beer, which is our West Coast IPA. My favorite beer, which is our West Coast IPA.
And the Australian voting public's favorite beer of yours as well.
Well, it's remarkable because this beer started off at 96 and then went to, I can't remember, 30 something. This year it's number 20. It's very funny. I was on a bicycle. I don't really follow the popularity vote. I don't really care. It's my favorite beer. And someone texted me congratulations, and I'm like, on what? And they're like, 20 should have been higher, and I'm like, 20 what? 20 West Coast. 20 West Coast what? And they're like,
maybe they've been drinking 20 West Coast, and that's right. Making sense.
Yeah, so it's a 7.2% IPA. That's not a very common style, and for it to be in the top 20 is quite remarkable on its own, without any money behind it, without any push in advertising and marketing. I know a lot of breweries take this very seriously and put a lot of energy into them. We don't really care.
But you're still happy enough that you broke the top 20.
It's you know what, I keep saying this is if I end up on a desert island, this would be my desert island beer. And I'm genuine about that. It's not because we make it. This is the beer that I'm most passionate about, and the beer that I would drink for the rest of my life happily, not complain. And I say that, and it's nice to see that other people feel that without being marketed to feel that.
Yeah. And I guess maybe that is your favourite, all the Hawkers beers, but if you were to look back over the first decade of the brewery, any sort of highlight beers, any highlight moments, any moments you look back and go, that's what it was all about, that was really special for me?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I mean, we started our barrel aging program with John Selton, who's now at Brick Lane. And to see our first beers come out of our barrels was remarkable, because I had never personally barrel aged beers. And I always wanted to delve into that. So that was very exciting. Alex, who is our head brewer, when he came up with the West Coast IPA, it was just an eye-opening moment for me. I wish I could claim credit to that beer, but it's all Alex.
And it uses a atypical hop as well. It's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't use one of the big hitters or the.
No, really annoying as well. He uses Southern Cross, which when we first started using it, it's a New Zealand hop, which for a while was dying off. It's a bit of a. It's not a super pride of New Zealand because it's not that trashy, but it's not a hop that had a cult following, and now it seems to have gotten so much following that more acreage is being put down of Southern Cross. It's not just us that recognize this hidden gem. Sometimes it's nice to see all the new experimental hops coming out, but to revisit some of the forgotten classics is very interesting. So that was a beautiful moment for us, for me personally. Our Pilsner is always a beautiful moment for me. As I get older, I drink more and more Pilsners. Not so much lagers, but Pilsners specifically. And I think our Pilsner is a excellent example of a German-style Pils. It's right on the edge of German and Czech. Mm-hmm. You can't really call it either because it has some New Zealand hops as well. But yeah, I'm really passionate about that. Some of the moments... we won a lot of trophies for a lot of other brewers when we were we still contract brew for a lot of brewers. But to see us win champion Victorian at the AIBAs, that's a special moment. For me, those kinds of trophies and medals at the AIBAs and previously the Indies, despite what everyone knows, I disagree with the judging in the Indies. In the last year, we pulled out of the Indies altogether because I don't agree with the scoring methodology that they used. To be recognized like that, those kinds of awards mean more to me than a popularity contest, because these are blind tastings by beer judges who are certified to pick out the faults in each beer. Our barley wine has won 4 gold medals 4 years in a row, so we've had 2 Consistency of Excellence awards. Our West Coast IPA has won 4 out of the last 5 years a gold medal and 1 year a silver medal, because someone completely screwed up in the back and sent a 10-month retention case rather than send a fresh case of
silver's pretty good for a pretty old beer.
And to be honest, silver medal for a 10-month-old West Coast IPA is just telling of the quality of the process that we have at Hawkers. But hopefully we'll get that back onto track. But I mean, 4 out of 5 is not bad.
And one of the things that we've enjoyed, I guess, drinking and observing, especially in recent years, has been some of the series you've done, especially around, the seasonal beers where you'll take a group of ingredients, hops, malts, whatever, use them in different volumes to make vastly different beers throughout the year. You've done the
terroir season, personally.
The experimental series.
The last couple of years have been... really exciting for me.
Yeah, and is that do they come from you? Do they come from the brewers? To sort of let's use different blocks or different times in the hop crop season or what have you, the harvest.
The experimental series I will claim credit for sure, because I grew up in a country which is old world wine producing, and by old world for me, I love wine. Mm-hmm. I'm not just a beer fanatic. I love wine. I love fine wines. And I find a lot of the new world wines are very 2-dimensional, 1-dimensional even, because they're single grape varietals. Doesn't take away from the great wine making skills and traditions that are coming out. But the problem with having, a focus on Shiraz or Pinot Gris or Chardonnay or whatever seems odd in the old world, because that grape will some years be good, some years be bad, and it's about the blending and it's adding layers of complexity and things like that. And so you begin to understand terroir as you grow up in that environment, and the impact of the soil and the sun and the rain and all the farming techniques. And what I saw in Australia when I came here was that the conversations were more about brands. I love Mosaic. What do you love about Mosaic? We're not using the right language, the right descriptors. I find it much more useful to use palate descriptors. I love grapefruit, pine, tropical, mango, whatever, in the flavor descriptors rather than use brand names that don't mean anything. So the experimental series originated from the fact that I wanted to actually push the consumers' education about these things away from, we did an early harvest versus a late harvest from the same hop in the same plot in the same farm, to show the difference that even the window of harvest in the year will affect the flavor of what you get in the hops. We did an experimental series where we took the same hop from the same country, 3 different farms in 3 different states. We could have taken 3 different plots in the same farm and probably had a similar result, just to show people that, you love Citra? Which Citra? What are you talking about? Use proper language.
Yeah, and I suppose that also shows the skill in brewers when there can be such variation in the same hop from the same grower in the same season. But if it's picked at different times or in different crops, in different lots, it could be vastly different. So to produce the same core range beer consistently,
say a West Coast IPA that might get a fair few gold medals or something.
Correct, and that, yeah, exactly, and that's the biggest challenge, right? In winemaking, you have one big harvest, you juice, ferment, age in barrels, and that's it. In beer, you produce the beer time and time again, but we still have one harvest. So we're still picking the grain at the beginning, picking the hops at the beginning, and we're storing them, and they age and their characteristics change, and we're using different terroirs. When we talk about pale malt, from which farm, who was the maltster, what batch was it? Because these are not uniform things, not one juicing, and then you know exactly what you're going to get, and it ages away. It's not the same grape. It's a continuously adjusted recipe to maintain that flavor profile. So there's a lot of credit to the brewers at Hawkers. The team there are just remarkable. They have a great sensory panel, and it's, to your point, it's so much more difficult to make a core range beer that tastes consistently the same than it is to constantly keep coming up with new beers. Because really, if you're coming up with new beers, there's no benchmark. There's no skill set to demonstrate your ability to produce time and time again. The beer might be great, but it show me that beer again and again and again and again, and show me that beer after 10 months when it's aged and it's still able to walk away with a silver medal.
Now, we know you've been sort of very outspoken on a number of issues over the years, and we'll come to, we already touched upon excise tax earlier, and we'll come to some of those in a bit. But I guess if we're talking about the 10 years of Hawkers, and I guess with a pretty big new chapter ahead for you, if you were to step back sort of, and look at Hawkers from the outside, what would you like to think, or what would you say would be the impact that Hawkers or Mazen has made in the 10 years up until this big change with the merger recently?
It's yeah, that's a trap, isn't it? It's
no.
It's a because it's very tempting to look back when we started our conversations in 2000, even before, was it 2014?
Well, I think I first interviewed you when you came over with 961.
Yeah.
We were at Rumi and we had a chat for about 45 minutes. I ended up with a 2,000-word article out of it about, starting airlines and being a war reporter. It was just like, who is this guy? And then probably not long after that, I guess you came back and we did meet up and, we went out for dinner and you were like, here's my idea for Australia. I'm like, sounds great. Just come and do it. Don't come and tell people what you're going to do it.
Yeah. And the conversation at the time was, after being out to Australia multiple times, it just struck me how inconsistent the beer quality was at that time. Mm-hmm. You would have a great pale from a brewery and come back a few days later, have another one, and it would gush out of the bottle. Mm-hmm. Back then, we were still drinking out of bottles. Imagine that.
Well, I think there was that part of the discussion, and also maybe sort of the network, the distribution that smaller brewers had as well, like the scale and I guess the approach they were taking to accessing the market. That was the thing that really struck me about what you were talking about early on. Going, I envisage that it needs to be more like this, like there has to be a grander ambition or a bigger scale to how you.
I remember one of the breweries that was the incubator for maybe 10 other brands that came about later when they all split up. There was one tiny little brewery that couldn't produce 1 million liters altogether if they tried. And I was like, there's no way that this industry is ever going to survive and mature without proper quality controls, without people knowing what they're doing, without a professionalism. There's a lot of passion in beer, which sometimes can overshadow that we are dealing with a very sensitive product. One bacterial cell can completely screw up a batch. And it struck me how, although it's been around for, at that time, 15, 20 years, how infant the industry seemed to be. And our conversations were, I wanted to come in and do something very professional. And in retrospect, I was having a conversation with Jane from Two Birds a few days ago. And she said, it's remarkable the impact that Hawkers had on the industry, which at the time also had, within a week, there was Pirate Life.
Yeah, I remember at the time thinking when you launched and Pirate Life launched within a week or 10 days, I think we wrote something at time ago, and it feels like this will be a bit of a seismic moment, like two businesses launching so close together who've got experience overseas and have this bigger picture. And I think whilst they've gone in different directions, I think that has proven to be the case. And maybe the industry was already growing fast at that stage, but then it started growing fast in a different way.
Yeah, I think, the biggest debate I had when we started was what size of brew house to have. Mm-hmm. And the prevailing logic was we should have something that is 1,000 liters per batch, 10 hec. And I wanted to do 100 hec. And finally, out of compromises, we ended up at 4,000 liter batches. And we rented this massive space in Reservoir, which I didn't know back then, was where you either went to get shot or get drugs. It's now been gentrified and it's now the coolest neighborhood, with all sorts of cool things happening around. But back then, when we first signed the lease, people were like, what the hell are you doing? Who sets up in Reservoir? And we took a 1,200 square meter warehouse, and people were like, you're mad? What are you going to do with this? Like, you can have kids play football in here. Who builds a brewery at that scale? Your smallest batch is 8,000 liters. Our smallest fermenter was 8,000 liters. And it was designed with a side port, so we had to recirculate the hops through it. So we couldn't brew a 4,000 liter hoppy beer, even though the brew house was 4,000 liters. It had to be 8,000 liters. So literally our pilot system was 8,000 liters. And, we started off with 4 people and the potential to brew, if we had really brewed hard, maybe 600,000 liters a year. We're now 40 people at Hawkers and we do 3.5 million liters a year. So in our first year, we did not sell beer south of the river. We didn't cross the river south, the Yarra River. Pirate Life went all ballistic all across the country and they built a brand really quickly. And we all know where that ended. We were focused on community, on really being involved in the community, becoming local to where we are. We came into a city that had a deep food culture, a deep drink culture, lots of breweries around. Our first off-premise sales rep focused for the first 3 months on just the suburbs around Reservoir, Preston, and Coburg, nowhere else. And he was only allowed to visit bottle shops. And back then, in those areas, you had
there weren't that many bottle shops.
There weren't that many bottle shops. And the bottle shops that were there were basically, run by immigrants who were probably watching YouTube and watching a Lebanese newscast, not really, never heard of craft beer, didn't really care. They were more interested in selling Jack and Coke than craft beer. And it's very funny. He spent a month sampling these guys, talking to them, and he couldn't get a single account. And one day he walked into a bottle shop where there was a Chinese guy behind the counter who he walked up to him and he said, here's some beers, they're cold, they're fresh. Do you want to give them a crack? And the guy said, no, come back next week. I'll try them and you can come back next week. And Tony lost his cool, started screaming, what the fuck? Try them now. Just fucking try them. They're here. I'm here. Just fucking try them. The guy cracked open a pale ale and ordered 4 cartons. And that was his first sale. And we quickly moved from 1 to 150 bottle shops in 6 months. And that was all Tony's work. There was a big advantage to being the first craft beer in these bottle shops.
Yeah.
Mazen, you've been a pretty outspoken critic.
That's
I think,
a very polite way of putting it.
A very mouthy person when it comes to the industry and problems within the market and the challenges. Do you see a sort of way forward, or what do you think the kind of big issues are, and is there a solution to them?
There always is a solution. When there's a will, there's a way, for sure. This isn't rocket science, ultimately, right? The frustration that I have is Australia, part of the DNA of being Australian is being able to go to the pub and share a pint with your mates. Right? And one of the main reasons that attracted me to move here and become an Australian is this is a country that is all about a fair go for everybody, a fair go for all. And it's all, I was taught the tall puppy syndrome when I came here. And it seems like we've done everything to cripple the very fabric of what makes an Australian an Australian. The government, through this archaic law of excise, which ironically under Bob Hawke became indexed to CPI, it was never indexed to CPI, has led us over the years to become the 3rd highest alcohol tax in the world. And through the years, wine, which has been much smarter than beer and more organized in the sense of how they lobby the government, have managed to diverge away from this excise law, which is supposed to be an alcohol tax, and they have the wine equalization tax, which is 80% cheaper than beer. I have never been to a country, including France and Italy, that are big wine producers, where people downgrade from beer to wine. It's always more expensive to buy wine by the very nature of it, right? This country is crippled in the way politicians handle affairs. You'll talk to governments and they will go, yeah, we'll look at it, but it's not our fault, it's the last government. Well, someone needs to step up at some point and have the courage to recognize that we are now at a breaking point. We're either going to wipe out all the medium-sized brewers and shrink back to just brew pubs and have 2 multinationals that don't pay any corporate tax, that control the market and bully everyone around. Or we're going to have to structurally do something to improve the environment. The government has indexed excise, which ironically, one of the components of the basket of goods where they calculate consumer price index is beverages. So the fact is they're increasing the price of beverages, which then increases inflation on top of it. And bear in mind, in this environment, Canada has lifted the minimum, the maximum volume you can produce to protect small producers, so that you don't pay excise on your first 1.5 million liters. In Canada, I think it's 1.5 million liters now. In Britain, they halved excise for small producers. In Australia, we moved from $50 per liter of pure alcohol to $52 per liter of pure alcohol from 2016 to July 2022. And then from July 2022, we moved up from $52 to $61.50. And we are in a positive budget where we have money. The Australian government spent billions trying to support a ridiculous industry called the car industry. We have a viable industry that spreads into agriculture, into hospitality. We're exporting. Hawkers has become the biggest craft beer import into Thailand. But what's happening now is the government not only is killing our exports, it's stifling an industry in its infancy that's finally starting to bloom. It's going to affect the agricultural sector around us. They can avoid these things right now because of the Ukraine war. There's a growing demand for grain, and they say, okay, you don't want to use the grain, we can ship it off to whatever country and sell it there. But they're killing an industry that has the potential to do something. We can see the impact on tourism in regional areas, the local impact on historical pubs that are going out of business because of all this stupidity. So can we do something to fix this? Absolutely. We are doing our best from our end, not counting on the government, by doing this merger that we have done. The government needs to step up and tackle excise once and for all. And it baffles me that they don't understand how popular something like that would be. It's not just popular to the beer industry. It's popular to the venues that can't sell more beer because the pint is going up. The pint is going up. They're killing off all the hospitality venues. And it's popular with the consumers because every time when the report is of increasing taxes, people lose their crap because it's part of our DNA to drink beer. Mm-hmm. If I was Albo and I have an election in a year, the easiest way to win votes is, guys, we're going to reduce alcohol on beer, tax on beer. And you know what? If it creates an imbalance in the budget, then maybe I'm not going to spend $98 billion on nuclear submarines that we moved from the French and lost $9 billion on the first deal. I mean, the government does so many stupid things. It's penny pinching on local producers that employ 70% of the people in the beer industry and wasting money on stupid projects, pretending that it can fight China in a nuclear war. Come on.
Yeah.
Get your shit together.
Yeah. And I guess that's it, isn't it? That we're at this stage now where there's been so many things that have gone wrong one after the other. I think we had a conversation probably 2 years ago, maybe it was a year ago. We said it's not so much like death by 1,000 cuts as like sort of taking a blow to the face. And when you try and block that, someone kicks you in the, and then you go to block that and someone else comes in from the side. It's like it's actual body blows being raining in from all directions. And it needs, the industry can do what it can to try and cut costs. It can try, cubes instead of cartons, all these kind of ways to try and sort of find a way to still sort of reach a price point for consumers. But ultimately, macro decisions need to be made to actually help support producers.
Feels like a scene in one of those cartoons where there's a hole in the dam and someone puts their finger in, and then there's another hole, and then you end up plugging holes.
Yeah.
So the goalposts have shifted over the years, right? When I came to Australia, and people say, well, excise was always there. Sure, it was a reasonable level. I mean, it was still high, but it could be managed.
Yeah.
It didn't go from 50 to 61 in a sprint, right? When real incomes of people actually went down. If everyone was getting richer, sure, charge $100, who cares? But everyone's facing a crunch. And on top of it, people underestimate the container deposit scheme. Mm-hmm. That on its own is $3.50 per carton. That is a new tax introduced. So to put things into perspective, 2 years ago, hawkers would have paid $4 million in tax to the ATO on $11 million of sales. Last year, we paid $5.4 million. An increase of $1.4 million. Where do I pull this money out of? I can't sell more beer because people are handcuffed by their living costs. I'm not allowed to sell more beer because tap contracts and the ACCC has done nothing to help, which are illegal everywhere else in the world. I have the two big retailers that control 65-70% of the liquor retail market, Coles and Woolworths and Endeavour Group, pulling all the small craft brewers back to regional. And you'll see people like Black Hops and Kaiju recently massively suffering from this because, well, our West Coast IPA is number 20 on the Gabs Hot 100. It's probably the most popular IPA in Australia of its class in West Coast, right? It also has won more trophies and more gold medals. It's won the champion IPA. I can't sell it outside of Victoria in any of the national retailers. Why? Because they've now introduced all these fake brands, their home brands. So if I can't sell into retail and I can't sell on tap, and the government is increasing my tax irrationally, something has to give.
Yeah,
We're smothering the goose that lays the golden egg.
And just so people understand, CDS in particular, it's craft beer is uniquely impacted by it because wine's not included, and also the industry is so limited releases are such a big part of the industry. So you have so many more SKUs coming out all the time. No one else really, unless there's small soda producers that are being just as impacted, they wouldn't be releasing that many different kinds of sodas that a brewery is.
So the big problem that we have, which is nuts, right? So this CDS was originally introduced in South Australia 30, 40 years ago when no one was recycling, to spur people to recycle. Get it? Bribe people to bring their cans to recycle. Today, Victoria has one of the highest recycling, not only in Australia, but also in the world. Fine. All the other states, in the middle of COVID, in the middle of a living crisis, decided to implement CDS. And they're marketing it to the consumer, earn and pay, collect and earn, right? Or collect and save, or whatever the hell they call it these days, right? So
return and earn.
Return and earn. Return and earn. Whatever it's called. Collect your cans and collect 10 cents per can. First of all, the logistics of collecting cans and then driving them out, already the impact on the environment is crazy, right?
And then you find a machine that isn't working, so
and
you
then
go
you
to the
find
next
a
machine that's not working either.
Correct. And you get frustrated, you chuck them in the bin. That's the collect and earn in New South Wales cost $405 million last year, of which $166 million went into administrative costs. I guarantee you, if we spent $400 million on educating the consumer and putting some yellow bins out in the street and frequenting or adding another bin on top of the yellow bin at home to segregate glass and cans and collecting them that way, people would be more than happy to do that, and we would have saved $300 million from that.
It does feel like one of the things that people have always recycled correctly and not put in their waste bin is cans.
Yeah. And then the irony of the whole thing is they actually don't mean to recycle, because they demand that we register each label before they allow us to recycle. So you show up to one of these machines, you scan the label. If the barcode's not registered, it'll reject it. Are we here to check the labels, or are we here to recycle? The recycling should be, it doesn't matter. You've given me this weight of metal. Here's your 10 cents. Done. I don't care what brand it comes from. But the implications of this label registration that we have forced onto brewers is we have to pay every CDS separate authority around the country a registration fee. And it can go from $270 a label to $17 a label. Per label, per state. Multiply by 6. So every time I ship 10 cartons of a limited release to South Australia, that's $270 that I have to pay. Plus the administration. Plus the stupidity of this government that forces us to issue them a report at the end of the month of how much we sold, so they charge us the money. And then at the end of the year, we have to take a stat deck to a justice of the peace to certify that what we have told them before is true. Like if I lied to you before, taking me to someone to certify that I promise, here's my hand on the Bible, I hereby swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, is really going to make a difference? Mm-hmm. Like it's just bureaucracy over bureaucracy over bureaucracy. Takes away from our time and energy, steals the money out of the brewers at a time when we can't afford it. We can't pass that $3.50. And that's just the cost of the can, not the registration. Mm-hmm. You know, someone like Coca-Cola, they have 2, 3, 10 SKUs that they produce 100 million cartons of. What's $270?
Yeah.
Zero.
You just need to start selling 100 million litres of beer, Maz, and then you'll be fine.
Well, if people drink 100 million, if the government gives us enough tax breaks so that people can afford the 100 million cartons of beer, sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so in short, there's a lot of major structural issues that I guess you've been vocal about for a long time. CDS has now added to those as well. And I guess, do you see hope that those things might change anytime soon, or even in the short to medium?
I think it's coming to a breaking point. I think this can't continue forever. I sure as hell wouldn't want to be Albo in this environment. I don't want to be the guy whose legacy is they've destroyed the beer industry and the alcohol industry in Australia, especially when there's so much artisanal passion and love behind what's being done. I think there's a lot more awareness amongst the consumers. Do I have hope? Absolutely. I mean, I'm an eternal optimist, so to speak. I'm very passionate about beer. I'm very passionate about the beer community and about what we do. I do think things have to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think on that note, it's always nice to finish on a note of hope and optimism, no matter how far-reaching that might be. So it's been great to have you in for a chat again. We've had so many great conversations over the years. Don't be a stranger, whatever happens in the future. And enjoy the 10th anniversary celebrations.
Thank you. It's going to be fun. Everyone should come.
Yeah, I can't wait. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Hey, sales reps. Have you ever thought about how much time you spend on admin, entering orders that come in over email, SMS, phone, or even Instagram messages? Could that time be better spent on the road, meeting new customers, running tastings, and building the brand? That's what it's all about, right? Well, that's where Phobo can help. Developed by people who are far smarter than I am, Phobo have created an AI platform that can read and process all of your customer orders instantaneously, no matter how they come in. Maybe Bill's Bottle Shop have sent you a text message saying, "Same as last week, mate." Or Ted's Tavern with an email, "Give me a keg of pale." No matter how casual the message, Phobo's AI has been taught to speak the language of beer ordering. Give the team at Phobo a call and let them help you get back to what you do best, meeting new customers and looking after your existing ones. Visit Phobo, that's foboh.com.au/crafty-pint and complete the brief form to find out more. And now, back to the podcast.
The Crafty Pint podcast is produced and edited by Matt Hoffman. You can get all your beer-related news and reviews on the Crafty Pint website, craftypint.com, and can stay up to date on future podcast episodes via our socials.
We wouldn't be able to produce the podcast or the website, events or festivals we run without the support of the beer industry, whether that's suppliers, bars, breweries or bottle shops. If you'd like to support the show or partner with the Crafty Pint in other ways, please reach out to Craig via the details in the show notes.
And if you're a beer lover who'd like to support what we do, you can join our exclusive club for beer lovers, the Crafty Cabal. Visit craftykabal.com for more.
And until next time, drink good beer.